Okay, we are live. Let me do this. This is so cool. It feels like a roller coaster when I press the button. Let me do it. Whoa, there it is. I love that last time. I did it by mistake last time, and now I feel like it's part of the entry point that we need to do. It's good to be back. This is our fourth one now, and exciting stuff. It's good to keep talking about accounting. Our favorite topic, right? Or sometimes maybe not. It just depends upon the day.
Okay.
Well, what do you want to talk about this week? You want to talk a little bit about maybe some process stuff?
Processes. Documenting accounting processes when accounting processes don't work, how painful processes are.
Absolutely. And so this is a topic, like, I love process. It's what that sort of is my sort of thing. I love process analysis. And I think there's a really specific reason for it. And it's because my personality, I'm very type A, but I've served as a COO a lot of times in my career, president and COO. And the reason is I'm good at process because I'm not good at process, right? I'm terrible at it in my own life. So I have to create operating systems. I have to create these methods and process, because if I don't, left to my own devices, I'll have 300 browser tabs open, and I'll be on YouTube in two of them and listening to three different types of music. It just doesn't work, right? So it is a really important part of the things that I do. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about, you and I were talking a little bit earlier even today about this concept of sort of inputs, throughputs, outputs, and then that results in an outcome for you. So let's just go high level. I mean, what does a successful accounting process look like? And we can even get a little bit into the roles, because for the most part, if we want to be highest and best use of our time, we have different roles in an accounting department that facilitate different aspects of that process, right?
That's right. Absolutely.
So let's talk about it from the beginning. What does a successful accounting process look like?
I think a successful accounting process is 1, documented, 2, followed by all, 3,
Yes.
is really consistent across the board.
Well, this is a good point, and I'm making notes because it is really true that if it's not followed by all, then it's not really then that means everybody has their own individual process, and it means that people become more expensive and irreplaceable to you because you're not sure how you're going to do it without them. I can tell you many times in my career of doing process work, I come into a company and they're panicked because somebody just left, and they're like, what are we going to do? We don't know the process. And then in many instances, we tend to find that when we are stuck in that situation where we have to figure out how to do it on our own, we find a way to do it very efficiently, much more efficiently than the last person who, seemed like they were pulling their hair out because they didn't have a well-defined process. They sort of left it up to chance. They were influenced by factors that they shouldn't have been influenced by. And I know I'm talking a lot here at the beginning because I want to set the stage. You and I talked about this a little bit this morning. One of the dilemmas we have as American leaders and North American leaders, the Western culture teaches us that when you're a leader, you're there to solve problems. That is the exact opposite of what Japanese management teaches. Japanese management says that when we see a problem, we should not address it, but we should truly try to understand what caused that problem in the first place. Because if our goal is to play whack-a-mole and just pop up things as they come up, well, then the more things that come up, the more stress that we get and the more energy that we use, when the reality is we might have found a way to just get rid of the moles in the first place. Exactly. So this patience is in that, because what'll happen if you're not patient and if you work with this hair on fire mentality, what occurs is, let's just say that we have a disaster today in our business and we're supposed to ship a product and it was supposed to go to New York, and we rushed it and we got it out the door and it gets there and we messed it up. And maybe the product that went to New York was supposed to go to Florida, and the product that went to Florida was supposed to go to New York. And now we just have this disaster on our hands. So the first thing American leaders will do, we'll never let this happen again. So we will change our entire business so that this will never happen again. And yet we never ask the question, has it ever happened before? Was it just a fluke that this happened? And now we've modified our whole business and our whole process and everything we do and all the steps. And we've added all these layers of protection in to protect us against something that's never going to occur ever again in a million years. And that's what I mean by when we have to step back and really take it slow. So comments on that.
Yeah, it makes me think of EOS. So there's a part of EOS called IDS. And so we identify, discuss, and solve. And I tell people all the time, if you have an employee who's late to work and then you have a manager's meeting and the managers go, the problem is Derek is always late to work. So Derek being late to work is not the problem. So we have to identify what is the real problem here. The problem is that Derek's not getting his work done because he's coming here late. And so why is that happening? Maybe that's happening because we have the wrong schedule for Derek. And so he's supposed to leave every day at 5 o'clock. And so between 8 and 5 o'clock and he doesn't get here at 9, we're missing that 1 hour. And so it's making everybody go into a tizzy. Derek doesn't work the right amount of hours. He's just not here enough, or he's missing this meeting, when in all actuality we could push meetings back an hour. We could change Derek's schedule. So then we get even deeper. Why is Derek late every day? Well, he's late every day because he has to take his kid to school. We can't change that, right?
Exactly. Not going to fix that ever.
Just to our listeners, Derek doesn't like kids, so he doesn't have any.
I've seen pictures. I don't know. It's just not my thing. I told you I heard that they were sticky, and I don't really like sticky stuff, so I'm like, I'm going to stay away from that.
I love it. But you know what I'm saying? So we have to identify the problem and then we discuss. And so a good open discussion internally, and this should happen when we're developing a process. So you and I just talked about this, Derek, and here's what happens. Derek and I are going to map out all the processes at Profit Matters. We just decided that 5 minutes.
We just decided it, right? We're like, they need to be revised. We haven't visited them in too long of a time. The business has changed too much since the last time we revisited the process.
That's right. And what's going to happen, Derek said, we're going to push these processes out and everyone in operations is going to go, but you don't even know the process. You don't know what happens here. You're missing steps. That's not how it goes. And so this is our opportunity, I think, to IDS our processes and say, let's identify what's not working in our processes, how they're broken. Let's discuss them and then let's solve them, and let's write a process that everybody can get on board with, a process that actually works, that makes things more efficient, something that everybody could follow. It's written in layman terms. And so I think that's what you're trying to say is it's not just throwing something out there. It's like we really have to dig into it and IDS the problem, right?
Yeah. In Six Sigma, we call this DMAIC: define, measure, analyze, improve, control. And if you think about that, we first have to define what it is that we want to map out. Well, we want to map out our sales process. Well, let's even go further than that. Let's map out what causes people to come to our website and to click a button and say, I want more information. Let's go through that process, because when we do that, we're going to understand a lot more about our customer. We also want to measure that. And that's why I showed you this morning a bunch of process maps that are very visual. And the reason is I don't want that in a written document per se just yet. I need to be able to look at it and step back and zoom out and say, there's 40 steps to our process. How do we get that to 20 steps, right? I have to be able to so I have to measure the number of steps and the time it takes to perform those steps. Now I could do that with time studies, and you and I have talked about this. This is an actual part of accounting, of going out with a stopwatch and saying, how long does it take us to do this? It takes us 26 minutes and 18 seconds to do this. Well, once I know that, then I can say, well, if we do, that means I could do 2 an hour, 8 hour day. I could do 16. Now, there's going to be meetings, so let's set a goal of 14, and then we know what our goals are based upon that time. There's another way to do it, and that is I'm working on some stuff right now with trucks. There's 12 trucks for this company that I've been working with, and they're all over the valley. Well, instead of going out and driving around with all 12 of those trucks, if I was a Deloitte consultant, I'd be happy to charge you $500 an hour to ride with each one of those truck drivers and map out what they do. But instead, there's another way to do it. And I can look at the number of orders we delivered today divided by the number of trucks. And then I know how many orders per truck per day on average. And I can go back and look at that over a 100-day time and see if there's any anomalies to that. And then I can begin to break that down. And I can say, okay, here's what it takes. When I measure it, we can do 8 loads per truck per day. Well, then I need to analyze that. What are all the steps that go into that? How do I improve that? So define, measure, analyze, improve is the next. I want to make improvements on that. Now, instead of doing 8 per day, we're doing 10 per day. then I need to control it. That's the point where I need to go and I need to document it out and I need to make it an SOP and I need to train everybody off it. But if I do that early on in the stage, in the define, measure, analyze, or improve stage, we are about ready to get some serious trouble because I'm going to bake into my business an efficiency, and nobody wants to do that.
This goes back to what you said a minute ago. It reminds me where you talked about the input and then the throughput. And you said if you have to go back and forth between the two of those, then the process is broken. So this happens all the time, just talking high level accounting process. Derek nailed it on the head. So what happens if you're listening, if you're a client of ours, or if you're thinking about signing up for accounting services with anyone, there's something called Ask My Accountant in almost every firm, or uncategorized. And what happens, I say, Derek, will you tell me what all of these expenses are for? And Derek goes, yeah, well, I don't have time for that right now. So I continue on preparing your financial statements. And I come back and I say next week, Derek, I really got to have this because I can't get you your financial statements until it's done. And he says, I'm still busy this week. I have to do all these things. I have a lot of responsibilities. I'm the CEO here, blah, 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 right? So this keeps happening where we go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. But if we say, Derek, we've sent you this, we're going to send it to you next month also if you don't answer it. But in between now and then, you're not getting financial statements. These are all the things that aren't going to happen. And we stop is basically what you're saying. We cut the cord and go, until we get this, we won't go to the next step. And it's almost like if I were making this bottle of water, I couldn't actually put the lid on it until the water gets in. And so when we start thinking about accounting like that, we
Same
have
thing.
1 through 10, and you cannot go from 1 to 10, then we stop breaking the process. And that is the problem we have.
Yep. It is. And so if you think about waste inside businesses, and I've written a couple books about waste inside businesses, and there's 8 different areas where in every single business you can find waste. When you're talking about manpower, the one that is most obvious when you step back, you can't see it when you're in it, but when you step back, is called waiting. And when you are waiting for something or someone, that means I'm paying someone to sit in a waiting room and wait for these things to happen. And now we all go, oh, well, they have other things they can work on. Sorry, that's BS. The truth of the matter is that when I am performing a task and I have to stop and wait on somebody else, or I have to go and acquire materials, or I have to get information, or I have to send an email, I'm waiting for people to get back to me on things. It takes me 21 minutes to get back. This is psychological studies that have been done. If I stop and I'm in flow and I'm typing and I'm writing this article, and I stop and I check my email to get back to that same level of the neurons and the synapses and all of the science part of it, to get back there, it takes me 21 minutes. Mm-hmm. So it's not just the time I waited, it's the time then I have to take to get ramped back up to speed. And in accounting, I got to think this is even worse, because it's like, well, it's been a week and then I get the file back and then I sort of have to get back in the mindset of that client. Okay, wait. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I got to put these here. Oh, there's this little nuance. Oh, wait. These guys do accrual accounting, not cash accounting. You know, it just takes a little bit of time. So all of that is waste. And if you can trim as much of that waste out of your business as possible, then you're going to be much, much more efficient.
So that's really good. So then talk about that. What are the things that you can do? Like, so you're saying that's one thing that a process eliminates waste.
Yep.
What else?
So, well, let me go back. What eliminates weight? It eliminates waste. That's the goal. There's 8 areas, and they call there's a sort of anagram for it called Tim Woods: transportation, inventory, motion, waiting, overproduction, overprocessing, defects, and skills. I had to count them out on my hands because make sure I didn't. But all of those areas are areas where there's waste inside of businesses. So what you've got to do, and I always do the same, I take the same process in every company, and that is that I always go to the end first. I go to the end of the value stream when we're delivering to the customer, and then back up from there. Because if you think about most businesses, they're like a funnel, right? So shipping out a product to the customer or delivering financials is that sort of last step at the bottom of the funnel. The materials left the building. So we can easily identify when that point is, and then we work backwards from that point, and we say how much of, if we think of input, output, and throughput. Yeah. So inputs are the beginning, right? Then there's the throughput, the process that we perform to get the task done. Then there's the output. I always know what the output is, right? I can see what that output is. It's a tangible thing. Input, I might say, oh, I need financials from this person, and I need this information, and I'm waiting on the government, and I have to talk to a banker. Those are all those pieces of input. So our goal is to attack all of those areas, but waiting is a really big thing. Now, I'm going to tell you a hack. Let me give you a hack to solve your problems if you struggle with this. That is outsourcing. Because the best way to get rid of a problem is to make it somebody else's problem. Isn't that what we do here at Profit Matters, right? We take all of those things that you're inefficient at, and because we have a process, we have the Profit Matters way, the way that we do business on a daily basis, we can take that element and put it into our process and produce the output that you want, but without you having to worry about the throughputs and all those kind of things. Now, going back to the Ask My Accountant, please, if you're listening and you're a customer, just get that file back to us as quickly as possible, because if not, we're sitting here waiting.
That's right. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense. This even goes to silly things like in accounting. This actually happens in firms, just so everyone knows. When you log into your bank account, you have to have that code. If there are more people working on an account and someone's sitting there going, does anyone have this code? Because you have to have it. There's not a way around it. And everybody's waiting on that. You know, you get into something and you're really in it, and then you need that one piece to finish it, and you don't get that code you need. And you do exactly what you said, Derek. You stop, and then you come back to it days later, when financials could have been done in 30 more minutes if we just had that code. And now we have that refocus time. You talk about the 20 minutes. We're asking for the code again, just the level of rework. And like you said, over processing, like how many times we go above and beyond to try to make up for our deficiency because we're on something, because we didn't get something. So we're like, oh crap, the financials are late. So now I'm going to do these 5 things that Derek asked me to that are really not in scope because I feel bad that his financials were late. When really the problem is because Derek didn't answer our questions. You know?
Well, that's why I joked the other day on a management meeting, and I said, we're 90% there with only 90% left to go, right? And that last 10% is the hardest part to get, because it usually are things that you're waiting on. And now in manufacturing, this is a little bit different. In construction, it's a little bit different. I am a big fan of not having work in progress. And some managers are like, well, let's just get started on it. And then it's like, do you understand how many times the scope changes between the time you get started on something and the time, people actually make the decision and where the rubber meets the road? This happens all the time. So we have to eliminate it from our business. We just absolutely have to think about this waiting room concept. If you think about what is the most annoying part of going to the doctors?
Sitting in the waiting room.
Sitting in the freaking waiting room. And that is a sign of inefficiency. I cannot imagine if somebody actually, and listen, if you are a doctor out there and you need help with this, call us, because we can help you on the accounting piece. But also look at your waiting room, look at the wait times as inefficiency and say, look, there's a problem with us. Are we scheduling too many people at the wrong time? Are we busier on Thursdays than Tuesdays? Because if you think about your business, you've got to staff to the highest level of usage. So if we could figure out how to level that out, if you imagine if you're driving on a flat tire, you can say it's only flat on the bottom, but it sure feels like it's flat all the time. And that's exactly what you're dealing with here, right? You're dealing with asymmetry inside of a business. So leveling those things out, that's what process mapping does. It allows you to level out this sort of supply and demand of my labor and the work, and you come up with this real even keel sort of way of approaching the business from there.
But even construction, manufacturing, real estate developer, whoever you are, you're listening to this, here's the whole point of it. Even you can see when you go and look at your own job site and you hear what we're saying today, it may be the first time that you had that aha moment. You think, my accountants can get my bookkeeping done. Why in the hell do they need me? We hear it all over and over again. You need too much of my time. Well, there's a lot of things we can't do without you. We don't know where you're using your credit card if it doesn't say on it, and we're not sure what you're talking. It's just the plain fact of the matter, and there are pieces of it that you never know. But you think about, like you said, you just mentioned construction. Well, you think about building a house slab. You're not going to pour concrete before you form it and you lay your rebar, right? And so if you're the dirt guys, you're not going to say that we're done doing the dirt work here and before you deliver the equipment. And so there is a stopping point for every other thing, just like I talked about the water bottle in manufacturing. I mean, we've seen people in manufacturing go, oh my gosh, Walmart committed to this order. And we're like, well, did you get the PO? And they're like, no, but we went ahead and ordered 20,000 jars because they are going to get the order. And then when the order didn't come through, that's okay when it's jars. Now we have inventory, we've wasted cash, we can recover from it. But we've seen circumstances where people buy things that are perishable
Oh,
And
yeah.
you go buying things that are perishable before, I mean, like, it's why there's got to be a process. It's got to say we have a signed purchase order that someone can't back out of before we go and buy this perishable thing going into this bottle. You know what I mean? And so it's just,
Yeah.
really, I think processes in general, what we're trying to say is a process can really be your CYA.
Absolutely. So it's funny you mentioned this because I actually talk about in my Lean Manager's book, all inventory is perishable. And what do I mean by that? Well, I'm going to give you an example. I was working with a manufacturing company here. This is about 5 years ago here in town, in Phoenix. And we were trying to reorganize their entire warehouse, about 100,000 square feet of manufacturing space and warehouse. And there was just one area of the warehouse that like the lights were super dark in. And I went back in there and I'm like, what is all this stuff? And it's just aisles and just stacked to the ceiling, 28 feet high pallets of product. And I'm like, what is this? And they were like, well, we had this idea a few years ago that there was going to be this rush around Christmas and we made up all this inventory. And this was a wooden product. It wasn't going to deteriorate it would take 500 years for it to deteriorate, but it had been sitting back there. The dust had gotten really, really heavy on it. There were leaks in the roof that had dripped down on, a pallet. I guarantee you this. I've worked around pallets my whole life. When you stack boxes on a pallet, the longer that it stays there, the more that the pressure of the top items push down on the items below and things start caving in on each other. And then we had a lot of birds in that warehouse because we had the doors. And guess where all the birds started nesting? Back in all that material. So I go back there and it's just destroyed. There's hundreds and hundreds of $1,000s worth of inventory that's destroyed. And I'm like, we just need to liquidate it and get rid of it. And they're like, we can't. Don't you understand how valuable this is? And I'm like, yeah, to the birds. Yeah. It ain't worth anything to anybody else. And those are the kind of things that we can't get ahead of ourselves. It's way better in business to be a little late to the game. We always want this first mover advantage. Well, let me tell you, I've found that a couple of companies where I was the first into the market, man, that's tough because you are the one that gets, all of the arrows, all of the stones, everything that flies at you because you're first in the market. It's probably a lot better to be like right behind at number 2.
At number 2 or 3, exactly. Yeah. I'll agree with that. You don't want to be first. You just want to do it better.
Exactly. And we think about this all the time. So we make decisions thinking that we're going to get ahead of things. Rarely can we get ahead of things. And then we have situations like what we're dealing with right now, where a war breaks out, or a pandemic comes into play. I think we've seen a really consolidated version of real life in the last couple of years. This is what happens all the time. Things change. And because things change, we have to make sure that we don't get out in front of it. And we call that overproduction. We've assumed that these orders are coming in, it's as good as done. Well, let's just wait till it's done before we do it. Well, listen, we're at 23 minutes. I think this was a great conversation. We didn't talk a lot about directly getting into the books, into financials, but we did get into what's behind that, right? The important thing is making sure you have a very, very well-defined process. If accounting is not your forte, you just need to pass it off to somebody else's process, right? Because we can take your outputs, which we'll call them our inputs, and we can turn them into an output, which is the final product that you want. So you can eliminate all those steps from your process by just passing it off to Profit Matters.
That's right.
Any last comments on that, Ashley?
No, I think that this was really great.
Yeah, it really was. And we can talk more about this. Give us your feedback. What do you want us to talk about every week? We're dedicated to be here at 11 o'clock Arizona time. I know that everybody's time zone changes this week, but we're here over lunch, every Thursday to talk about the things that matter to your business. And so if you've got ideas or suggestions, hit us up. We're happy to help. Okay, well, until next time.
Thanks, everyone.